Hello everyone, my name is Astrid and I have the pleasure of sitting here today with Vanja Vasic, the Director of Fashion Art Toronto, and Liam Colbourne, who is the Director of Production at Fashion Art Toronto. I'm very excited to be sitting down with you guys to talk a little bit about your most recent incarnation of Fashion Art Toronto. Now the festival usually runs about 5 days in April. There are about 50 different artists and designers that would show in one space. You have definitely been able to make quite a name for Fashion Art Toronto over the years. But recently, when the world kind of went upside down, Fashion Art Toronto found that they had to kind of change gears a bit, and they birthed something that I think the entire industry is so impressed with, which was Fashion Art Toronto's Virtual Runway series. So the latest incarnation of the Virtual Runway was about 20 different designers in 10 locations. June, we had a little bit of a first series just to kind of test the waters on how this thing would go, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in saying that it went pretty well. So for you guys, what I think most of the people watching want to know is, what were your biggest challenges when you were organizing the virtual show? How did you overcome these challenges? What was it like for you guys?
Well, I think, the number one challenge for us, as probably for many events, was the limitations surrounding COVID. I mean, now we couldn't be inside, we couldn't have an audience, we couldn't be in physical contact with each other. So the main challenge was, can we even have an event, first of all, and second of all, how can we produce an event with all of these limitations? And I think the way that we overcame some of these challenges, that we kind of used these limitations to our advantage, and we
pivoted really quickly.
Yeah, and in a way, like, the limitations were what made this
so legendary
and special. Like, now we had to be outside, we had to, makeup had to be done differently,
And being outside in itself has its own limitations. There's weather, it was really cold on a few of the days. So we also have to factor in light and
because
time of day.
And
so there was a lot of, it wasn't just pivoting from a virtual or from live to a virtual. It was pivoting the entire event. Everything that we sort of are used to in the status quo of Fashion Art Toronto year by year. This year we really had to think about every aspect of it, from production to filming, which was a
whole new experience for us. Yeah.
Filming in itself is such a vast, and thank God for the team, but it was such a vast thing to learn and focus on. So those are definitely some big challenges.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely had to kind of reinvent the wheel here. This had never been done before, especially on a scale like this. So it's really interesting to hear how you guys managed to pull it off. Now, from an audience or a viewership perspective, what do you think their impressions kind of were about the difference between a virtual show and a regular show, where you're inside and you have that experience? How did you really make sure that you were going to bring the wow factor to each show?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the in-person event, it is a different experience. On the one hand, you have, as an audience member, you're walking into the space, you have this, the allure of the show, the lights, the cameras,
the ambiance,
the audience, looking at other people's outfits, talking to people, just sitting in that front row, the lights going on, the music, you're just kind of surrounded by that experience. And I think with the virtual show, we wanted to keep that same level of awe. So one of the ways that we did that was that we still kept that live element. We did everything live instead of pre-recording, so that the models can be kind of on, the team could be on, and there was still that sort of feeling of excitement.
Yeah. Well, whenever we would say okay, we're live now, everybody was energetic and excited to do that, because it still had that go model kind of feel, where you're live, you're in the moment, everything that you do is seen by the public. And that's sort of, I think, one of the good parts about doing a live event. but
Yeah, but also
capturing
like
it
what was
good.
really sort of the awe factor, I think this year, which made it special, was that like now everybody could participate. All the audience members can be involved. They could comment with the live segments. They could be involved. They could watch from different parts of the world, which was amazing. And also the experience of just watching fashion, sort of like in all of these amazing locations that are sort of like iconic Toronto locations. Now, you know, we couldn't have the lights of the indoors, but we could now present fashion in all of these different cool landscapes.
Gardens,
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah.
the different landscapes. It was really beautiful to be able to have a really good representation of Toronto itself.
Yeah.
It really put the Toronto in Fashion Art Toronto.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Absolutely, that is such a good point. I did want to ask for Vanya, why did you choose to have 12 days of FAT? I know that normally if the show were to be running in a non-COVID world, that it would be 5. So what was it about the virtual show where you decided that there needed to be 12?
You know, when we have our in-person event, we usually do a 5-day event. We showcase anywhere from, you know, 8 to 10 designers per day. You know, and it's inside, so you have like everything is controlled, you know, but you know, this was the only way we could actually accomplish filming 25 collections, because now we had, like, the vision of this event was that each designer had a unique spot. So it was impossible to, you know, go from one spot to the next spot with 10 collections in the day. We had to, you know, disperse it out over a period of 12 days. And, you know, we basically picked one location per day that had multiple areas so that each collection could be unique. So it was kind of like the only way we could manage, you know, doing anything. You know, it was extended work and time for all of us and all of the crew, but it was the only way that it could be done.
Yeah, it was a lot of time per day. Like, we did, I would say, on average 3 shows per day, and those are long hours for everybody, the designers, the models, the crew. So if we were to jam it all into 5 days, by the end of the shows, everyone would just be exhausted.
Yeah.
We would have to start at like 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm not a morning person, but so this way it sort of made it a little easier for everybody, and, you know, call times weren't super aggressive and early, and it ran a lot smoother with the 12 days.
That's actually really interesting to hear. I mean, obviously the time would make it run smoother, but like just sort of being like outside of the average where it's the 5 days, everybody has a schedule, everything is on time, and then boom, 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 it makes sense that obviously when you're not in the same space, you don't have everything held together, people have to come from different places, and then you also have to move yourselves. So I'm really glad to hear that it was able to work out. And
and another thing is that, like, because we are actually producing each show, so it's not like, you know, where, for example, you know, Paris Fashion Week, a lot of these designers have their shows already produced, but we're actually doing everything ourselves. So we're producing the whole show, moving from location to location. So yeah, definitely more time consuming.
Absolutely. Liam, I have a question for you. So as the director of production of Fashion Art Toronto, I just want to know what you love most about your job.
There's a lot of things I love about it. I would say the most important thing that really resonates with me is the community itself. I mean, everybody that was part of this project was excited. I mean, we were sort of all stuck at home. COVID started, and there was just not really a lot to do. There wasn't a lot to see. I know I myself spent a lot of time catching up on TV shows and stuff like that. So this whole the whole project brought everyone together. It brought the performers together. It brought music together. It brought the models and the designers together. It was a great experience where we were able to pivot and change and give the viewers something a little bit different. And, you know, I really do think that because of this, it has changed so many different aspects of Fashion Art Toronto that we'll probably continue doing a lot of the things we're doing now in the future. And with that, I think everybody feels the same. Like, we're all very excited that we got to do that, and that we got to bring everything together and be creative in a time that there's not really a lot going on, and a lot of people were struggling. I mean, there were many models and designers that were like, you know, because of this, like, I actually feel like I'm doing something, and it was a really positive experience, and in my opinion, very important for mental health. I mean, uplifting, yeah. Arts and culture is, in my opinion, one of the most important things in any community, because it allows for an expression that you wouldn't normally get in any other, pathway. So I think that's my biggest happiness, is being able to have the community together and watching everybody blossom. I mean, seeing the designers coming out with different things where normally they wouldn't have to have a mask, or they wouldn't have these like staple things that they have to do in order to be in their collection. They would have free reign. So making the masks for each collection, they get to explore a different side. You have the face covering. So where how are you going to display that? How are you going to make it cool? How are you going to make it match your collection? And then the models, like taking the garments and the location and the atmosphere, and then making it their own, playing with it, seeing all of the different things and interpretations that they come up with for all of the different shows. Those and locations, of course. The locations, I would say, are probably the most iconic thing. There's so many things in Toronto that we got to film in, and I think all of that together really resonated with me, and probably with everybody involved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can only testify as somebody who modeled in a couple of the shows, but I do know that, like, for me, runway and just like modeling, being there, especially fat, is probably one of the highlights of my entire year and my entire life. And I was so happy just to be there. Like, on the day that I was walking in the first show, it was raining. I was wearing like a really kind of skimpy outfit, didn't even care. I was just so like warmed from the inside by seeing all my friends, like even Lisa, who was running around with the hair. I was so happy to see her, and I really think that Fashion Art Toronto sort of just has this vibe of family, which I know you guys have explored in the theme of this year's show. We're all in this together.
Yes.
And I just totally agree. Like, it was really great for the people that were involved, as well as the people that got to watch it from the outside perspective. It was just something that I think was really, really great, and it happened at just the right time. So thank you guys for doing that in general. Another question I have now for both of you. I would like to know what your most memorable highlights from the show were.
I think for me it was like the opening night of Fashion Art Toronto, or day I want to say, but it was that moment when we were at the Bentway and the sun was setting and we were rushing to film House of Manon. And the lights were going down, but luckily there was like a little bit of lighting like from the actual venue. And when that show went on, and just like kind of watching the models in this sort of like grand space with like this sort of like moodiness of that night.
Sounds a bit surreal.
It was totally surreal, but it was also like so like it made me think like, wow, this is something really special. This is something really grand, it's something epic, like we're doing something really important, and also like it was so telling of this moment in time of like isolation, because it was so lonely, that we had these
no
models, like no audience, like it was just this feeling of like dystopia, and it was just so like perfect, but it was such a special time, and that collection too was just like magnificent, like as an opening sort of
the show. I remember when we finished filming the show, like me and Vanja, there was so much emotion at the end of it. It was the first day, it was like cold, and everybody was just sort of like hustling, but there was so much emotion after, because...
And for the designer too, like for her as well, there was that emotion, which we saw, and it was that, everything kind of came together, like that perfect moment, and it was the opening, thank God, So that was definitely a memorable moment for me.
That's very sweet.
I would say for me, I have a few, but I would say the 2 or 3 that were my favorite. So Ronnie X, he did one of the music videos, and it sort of became our theme song.
That was fun.
Me and Ronnie, we would dance and like try to learn the choreography, and we would play it like over and over and over again. and just like listen to it. It gave such good vibes, and it was it was a really great song to have as our theme song for the year. Like everything that the music video was just like good energy, wonderful production. The dancing was fantastic. The music itself was catchy and uplifting, and it was I really enjoyed it. And me and Vanja, we just
the whole crew would play the song going to other shows and like kind of to energize the team.
Sort of like
that was cool.
Manifesting that energy into what you're about to do.
And watching the show like live too, like seeing it while they were doing it, it was so well done. And I just like
amazing,
and Ronnie's such a sweetheart too. So it was all encompassing. That was my favorite. My second would be filming at the Science Center.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was incredible.
As a kid, and I'm sure you too, like you go and you see the Science Center and the Ontario Place and you're a kid and you're like, oh, this is so cool. And it sort of has this like grand nostalgia feeling. Yeah. And so when I actually like walked into the door of the Science Center the first time and I'm like going through like the different areas, it was so rewarding and such a great experience to see sort of a full circle of like, first I was a spectator and now we actually get to work there. And normally like we wouldn't be able to do that.
I think it was these circumstances surrounding like COVID, that we were able to be in such an incredible space, that now like at that time was close to the public. So we were kind of there, apart from the people working there, we were there on our own and we were able to shoot in some of these like unbelievable, like surreal locations at the Science Center that are like...
It's like the sets were already designed, they were already ready to go, we just sort of walked in and did it, and it was so...
Yeah, working in some of these amazing locations, like also like, the Ontario Place too, that's such a nostalgic location and place for so many people. And I think I heard this from like a lot of our audience members, like, wow, you're at the Science Center, or you're at the Ontario Place. Like I remember going there as a kid and all of these things, so like being able to showcase these like amazing places that are so iconic of Toronto, like was amazing through fashion, which is what we love to do. So yeah.
And it was even more iconic for me because I didn't grow up in Toronto. I didn't really I only started living in Toronto in 2011, so it was like sort of weird because growing up in a small town and then taking the bus and going down and having the whole field trip thing, it was an experience that sort of came full circle. And being in Toronto and doing all of these projects with the different venues, it was a really rewarding experience.
That is touching. I am actually touched. I might cry just a little bit here. I'm really glad that we got to go over some of the more rewarding and incredible experiences that you guys have had. But as they say, live shows are live. I can see from your faces that you already have some thoughts in your mind. Yeah. I wanted to ask more about some of the more memorable mishaps or even surprises that happened this round that kind of stuck in your mind.
There's a few. I would say the Ontario Place was definitely it is an expansive plot of land.
Yeah, so we weren't ready for that.
Yeah, just the geographic like getting from one place to the next. We started out at the docks and then we had to like go over to the Cinesphere and then we had to go all the way to the front and it's not just, the models and everybody that has to go. It's the crew. It's the cameras. It's Jack and Felipe running with all of the cameras to try and get the next one because we have only a limited amount of light. And so that I think, not necessarily a mishap, but it was a really big issue.
Yeah, and also, of course, like that day, the drone wouldn't fly because the airport was very close.
Yes. And then we couldn't have the drone on the pier because there was the airport.
And the lights were, of course, going down, so we were losing light, which was also crazy.
And it's so funny because these are certain things that you can't necessarily plan for. They just kind of happen in the moment.
The panicked phone calls, like, we're on our way, we're coming.
Yeah, and also for me, it was that day where we came back to Ontario Place. And we were now going on the rooftop on the pods, which is like an incredible thing that we got to be able to go up there. But at the same time, it was like the most freezing day of all, like so cold. And I just remember thinking like, are we actually going to go up there? Like, are we going to get blown over by the wind? Like,
Oh
we're
my
really on the
God.
roof. Like, the whole city is up here, you know? So that was like really intense moment. And I'm sure for the models it was really intense because, you know, it was hard to be.
Well, and not only that, like as we were ascending, it started to get colder and colder.
And
I'm just like putting my jacket like tighter,
does it
and looking
end?
back at everyone, and being like, "I'm so sorry, everyone."
Yeah, and everyone was kind of like, are we actually doing this? And we're like, yeah, we're doing
We're doing this. Then we
you
got
know?
up to the top, and
Yeah.
we're setting everything up, and there was like everyone in the crew had this sense of urgency, like let's get this done and like finished so we can get the heck off of this rooftop.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, because of that, you know, when you watch the video now, you can see that atmosphere. The atmosphere is there, and it's what makes it like even more compelling for me, you know, because you can really see that like the moodiness of like the sky and the wind and everything, you know.
It was like gray skies,
Yeah.
little bit of sun. You'd see the wind in people's hair. The garments were moving. There was so much life in that. Even though it was a bit dreary, that collection had so much life to it, and it was really cool.
Which I also think is a thing that you can't, or I guess you don't really think about as much when you're doing it like inside of a building, is how nature can enhance a show. Like that's one thing that you never even think about.
Exactly, you're kind of leaving it to nature to
Yeah.
go
We're at
any
your
way it
mercy.
wants. Really, it can be cloudy, it can be windy, it can be sunny, it can be rainy. Like, you know, so you're kind of leaving it up to nature in some ways.
And it also helps us, like, a lot of the ideas for the angles and some of the choreography, like, a lot of it was, we planned everything, but when we get there, so many things can change because of it. And I think a lot of the times we come up with something even better.
Even better, absolutely.
Just because there's, you know, overcast, or it's really windy one day, or like all of the different environmental factors, they were very hard to deal with for everybody involved, but it produced such a beautiful result.
Yeah.
That's exciting. There's actually one thing that I remember, which I think as a viewer was the most memorable thing about, the most memorable mishap, I would say, was the Ade show. And just like watching that happen live, you're just sort of like in your room on your phone watching a show, like, is this really happening right now? For the viewers who may not have seen that show, I'll kind of run it down a little bit, but we're in an alleyway and the models are doing their thing, they're being fierce, everything is fine, and then a car pulls up, like right there,
Out of the garage.
and as the guy kind of hangs out the window, like, what are you guys doing here? Like, do you have a permit? I live here. I have to get to work. The models just don't stop going.
They're just walking past the car,
and like they're just going past the car, they're doing their pose and
in
going
front
back.
of the car.
And like I'm sure that the guy was just like, what is going on?
No, I don't think he understood what was going on.
Yes.
He wasn't really interested. He just wanted, you know,
I
to
just-
drive it. And I mean, you know.
But I just thought that those models handled that like
Really well,
perfectly.
yeah.
But it was also just hilarious that
Yeah,
they did
exactly.
not stop. Like at all
and I mean,
costs.
we had to shoot that 3 times, and by the
Oh,
time we shot that the 3rd time, the light was again very low, but which actually worked out great because the designer had
those little like LED masks.
Yeah.
So it was really good.
And because it's so cold, this is one thing that we sort of had to figure out throughout the entire show is battery life. Like your battery, if it's freezing cold, doesn't last very long. So during the live performance, when we actually did it, the final version, right at the very end, like I didn't even hit the stop. My phone just died. Luckily, we saved everything and everything was like able to go up. But it was like I had to plug it in and then it came up and the video was still there. Thank God. That we did it. But like that's the type of thing that you don't even sometimes think about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I know that we kind of mentioned this a little bit. I think you might have mentioned this with the accessibility aspect that a lot of people, a lot of the viewers really seem to have grabbed onto. I was just curious for future iterations of Fashion Art Toronto, if you think that you might be incorporating some of the things that you learned, some of the strategies from the virtual shows into when we can eventually have a show that's in a building again.
Oh, 100%. I think there's so many things that we've learned, you know, as a team and an organization that will enhance the shows, even if I think we're doing the live shows in an actual building. There can still be so many other aspects of film that we can incorporate. Bringing different options and different medias together. I mean, that's the whole premise of
And also, like, for me, what's exciting is just working with these like different locations like across Toronto. Like, I definitely want to incorporate that element somehow, into a public event. How can we use these spaces that we have that showcase our city into runway, even with like audiences. So definitely.
Wow, that's incredible. There's so much in store. That's exciting. I actually had a question for you, Vanja.
Yes.
This is a little bit of a pivot, but you recently became the recipient of the FGI Toronto Visionary Award. And FGI Toronto is the Canadian and Toronto, but it's also the only one in Canada, chapter of Fashion Group International, which is sort of like a worldwide conglomerate of very powerful fashion figures. And you were recently recognized with this award. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because I'm sure that it was a very humbling experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, it was humbling, and it was amazing, just to see that all the work that we did, that as a team, how much work it took to pivot our event into sort of this virtual show, that we were sort of recognized by our community of peers, people that we really admire in the fashion industry, and I think that was very validating, and that people were watching, and that that they felt that this was an important endeavor in the Toronto fashion scene and the Toronto fashion community, that we did something really big and really important. And I think for me it's also it's great, even just sort of looking back when we did that first series in June of 2020, we were sort of the first ones to take fashion to the streets during this pandemic and use the landscape of the city to showcase collections, and now I'm watching a lot of these international fashion weeks, currently Paris Fashion Week is on, and we're seeing a lot of these, everything is digital, there's no audience present for this one, and we're seeing a lot of really cool spaces being used in these shows, using that element of space in the show. So I think, definitely
pioneers,
every
year.
Good,
And also, I think that the award is really good for the fat community as a whole.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not to take away from you, but you are the person who has created this, and it's sort of nice for the fashion community in Toronto and FGI to recognize that and celebrate that, because you're the visionary behind it.
But there's so many people involved.
Yeah,
in
there's
the
so
event,
many people involved.
Not just our team, but the designers and the
models, hair,
makeup, everybody sort of in that community that was
for
participating in this thing to make this impact. All of us together, that created this whole new vision.
It's a win for the whole fat family.
That's so sweet. I do have one more question to ask you guys, and I know that you might like to keep certain aspects of certain future Fashion Art Toronto plans under wraps. I don't blame you for that. But if there is anything you could tell us about the future of Fashion Art Toronto from this point on, how would you describe it? Please be as vague as you like.
Well, we are actually gearing up to present something in the spring-summer of 2021. So we are opening up our applications for designers to submit work, to showcase their collections for the spring-summer edition. So plans are still underway. We're still sort of conceptualizing what that's going to look like. There's definitely going to be, the virtual element, the digital experience, and we're going to see similar ideas as we saw in the last edition. But of course, there's going to be a lot of new concepts and ideas, and we'll see what's possible, obviously. But yeah, we're taking applications.
What I'm hearing is that we have a lot to look forward to.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting from this. Well, thank you guys so much for sitting here and talking with me today. Again, this has been Astrid interviewing Vanja and Liam from Fashion Art Toronto. This has been so inspirational and educational, and I'm sure that everybody watching is going to love it too. Were there any other little sign-offs that you guys wanted to say?
No, just stay tuned on everything that's going to be happening for the viewers at home. We have a lot of things coming out in 2021, so
Yeah.
Make sure you follow.
Check it out.
Check
follow
it out.
the socials.
Follow the socials. Follow.
And YouTube as well. Definitely
And
join our
YouTube.
Like and
channel.
subscribe.
Yeah.
Yes. Make sure to follow on the socials at Fashion Art Toronto. All of them, all of the socials, just to keep yourself aware of what's going on for any exciting announcements that may or may not be in our future. You can follow me on Instagram at SEDGVVICK, 2 V's instead of a W, Sedgwick.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.